Airlines Confidential with Scott McCartney is made possible with support from Pratt & Whitney, committed to working smarter, cleaner, and greener today for a more sustainable tomorrow. PrattWhitney.com. Infinity Flight, the leader in Cadet Academy flight training programs. InfinityFlight.com. Ontario International Airport in Southern California. SoCal So Easy. And by Cirium, the world's most trusted source of aviation analytics. Cirium.com. We also welcome your business's support. Contact us at airlinesconfidential.com.
Welcome to Airlines Confidential. I'm Scott McCartney, and I'm apoplectic about a shocking development in air travel this past week. SeatGuru, a website I relied on and recommended for more than 20 years, is no more. Gone, kaput. Its owner, Tripadvisor, shut it down in a cost-cutting move. SeatGuru is but a footnote in aviation history, an artifact in the Museum of Consumer Travel Tools. Maya Leibman, welcome back, but how am I to survive without a trusted website to tell me whether 14D is a better seat than 18F?
Thanks, Scott. It is good to be back. And I have to say, that is not the shutdown I thought you were going to be talking about.
No.
We do have a lot to talk about with that other shutdown, the U.S. government, that is, and a lot of other news this week. Plus, we're going to talk with Alex Cruz, who's had this just amazing career. He was the former CEO of British Airways. Before that, the low-cost carrier of Welling. He started his career at American. He's got so much experience, and he's, really interesting, often provocative, and I'm really looking forward to talking with him. And let me add a big Veterans Day salute to all who served our country. Thank you all for your sacrifices. Veterans Day is an important reminder of the sacrifice millions of Americans make for the greater good. Interestingly, it's also in the UK, Remembrance Day, and everyone here wears these red poppies to signify the veterans. And I thought it was interesting that I looked up why the poppy is the symbol of Remembrance Day, and it has to do with the fact that these are the flowers that sort of first grew on the battlefields after the battles were over. And just in really stark contrast to the desolation of the war and the battle, then you still have flowers that are able to spring through. So happy Veterans Day to everyone. And I'm with you, Scott. I'm sad that SeatGuru is gone. It was one of the reliable places to go find out and get the straight scoop if that window seat truly had a window.
Yeah, no, right. They did a good job, and it really was accurate. And airlines paid attention and made sure that they had accurate information.
Yeah, for sure.
It is sad that they couldn't monetize it enough to make it work, I guess. So let me add my thanks as well to all the veterans and their families out there. It really is an important day to remember. I love that about Remembrance Day and Veterans Day. So Maya, the government shutdown must look very different from the other side of the Atlantic. And I'm sure your friends in London are watching with both disbelief and perhaps amusement. We're recording this on Monday. So it looks like there is a compromise in the Senate. It's not clear yet whether that's going to work in the House. But it looks like we are finally getting closer to a resolution. And maybe by the time this airs, there actually will be a resolution. I think, Veterans Day is also a reminder to all in Congress how important it is for them to lead and to keep the government running. Normally, I would hope that Airlines Confidential would not be a place where things like government shutdowns would have to be discussed, but air travel was this past week thrust into the vortex of politics and used as the device to try and squeeze Republicans and Democrats into compromise or capitulation. And it looks like that's working, right? Air travel has become a made-for-TV crisis, complete with CNN running a tally of flight delays posted on the screen like hurricane wind speeds. The Department of Transportation ordered airlines to cut flights from schedules at 40 major airports because of concerns there would not be enough air traffic controllers. The order was published a mere 12 hours before it went into effect. Cuts of 4% of scheduled flights started out last week. Monday, I saw about 5% of flights were canceled. Causes a lot of disruption. The threat was it would increase to 10% by Friday if there's not a resolution, and could go to 15 or 20%, according to Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy. Duffy said this was a data-driven decision based on, quote, aviation safety data that had raised concerns, yet he didn't share the data, not with airlines, not with the public. He did say he'd share it later. I think the point of all this was the chosen way to really pressure Congress to open up the government again. On Sunday, Duffy ratcheted up the scare tactics, saying air travel, quote, could be reduced to a trickle, unquote, before Thanksgiving if there was not a budget deal. Whacking at airline schedules and playing the safety card immediately got round-the-clock news coverage and certainly increased pressure on Democrats, which clearly was the intent. But amid all the predictable and frankly uninformed coverage of what was happening with air travel, John Ostrower's The Air Current did some excellent reporting that really stood out to me. The Air Current talked to 9 C-level executives at 6 airlines and reported that those executives were really skeptical of safety concerns and seeing this as increasingly political. I might add that's no surprise, since 2 CEOs, Scott Kirby and Robert Isom, went to the White House last week and really became political props in a show with Vice President J.D. Vance, blaming Democrats for the shutdown. But the reality here is that TSA and air traffic control are 2 of the most used federal government services, short of mail delivery. This is retail government. This has been the focus throughout. And the administration certainly knows that any storm or outage, or in this case, shutdown, media runs to the airport because that's the easy way to report on the impact. Nobody does stand-ups from the desks of IRS workers or concession stands at national parks or cancer research offices that have been closed for lack of funding. They go to the airport. So let me just say, this is not a political statement, but given all the other things the government has chosen to fund during this shutdown, it appears they could find a way to pay these workers as well. I mentioned last week that there's $18 billion in the FAA's Aviation Trust Fund, and that could quickly be appropriated to pay air traffic controllers if those in Congress, the administration, wanted to. Clearly, they do not. But let's hope this is all moot if there is a settlement. And while I'm at it, in the outrage at Washington politics department, the current manufactured air travel crisis strongly shows it is time for a new structure for air traffic services. Around the industrialized world, independent and semi-independent organizations with reliable funding and corporate world efficiency have shown they can innovate and safely manage services better than government alone. The FAA should be the safety regulator, not both the safety regulator and the service provider. But to get there, we need to look at this differently. And we need a trusted, independent, blue ribbon Manhattan Project kind of research to recommend the best structure for the U.S. and the future path to not only modernize and staff air traffic services safely and efficiently, but also to remove critical infrastructure from being used for political purposes. I posted my list of 18 nominees for the Air Traffic Control Manhattan Project on LinkedIn, just for fun, I know, but chances of getting this much traction are really pretty slim. But this is a huge issue for the economy of this country, and we need to improve. Why are we so afraid to improve? Why are we even afraid to at least study if there is a better system for the U.S.? Because this current system ain't working so well right now.
You tell them, Scott.
Yeah.
You keep beating that drum, and maybe someday someone will listen to you.
That is the definition of insanity, right?
But I love it, and you're absolutely right. There's a real cost to this shutdown, obviously. All the attention on air travel disruption means people aren't buying tickets like they normally would. The airlines have said that this shutdown is going to cost them in terms of, not just in terms of the government travel that's being canceled, but also the travel by the sort of government adjacent, like the suppliers and contractors and consultants and plenty of others who now aren't traveling because the government isn't traveling.
Yeah.
And a lot of business trips aren't happening, and that hurts the airlines. And then when people hear about more and more schedule cuts and disruption at airports and long lines and delays, it doesn't take much to have people say, okay, forget it. I don't even want to try. And so I'm not going, or I don't want to buy a future trip. And, the airlines have all offered refunds for anyone who doesn't want to travel right now. I mean, it's just a huge economic hit for the airlines. And this is, at the same time, we just got through with the third quarter earnings calls, and pretty much every airline said that they were really looking forward to a great fourth quarter, and it was going to make their profit estimates for the year. And now we have this huge political storm right in the middle of the quarter, and it's just so unfortunate. It's just so typical for this industry that we just can't catch a break. I mean, there's just careen from one, awful exogenous factor to another.
Yeah, no, we talk about how everything that happens affects airlines, right? If it's bird flu or, weather or pandemic or, everything.
Yeah. And I have a funny story. I'll just jump in. Nate Gatton, who runs government affairs for American, it was somewhat new to the business. And he was like having that epiphany that everything in some way affects the airlines. And he saw, I don't know if you remember, many years ago, there was this issue. I can't remember. It was like in Michigan or something with baby formula, that they couldn't get enough baby formula or something. There was something wrong with the baby formula. And so,
yeah.
And he thought, clearly this is something that won't impact the airlines. But then the airlines got asked to transport baby formula to Michigan or wherever it was. Yeah. He's like, I guess I was wrong. I guess everything truly does touch the airline industry in some way.
No, it is really true. Really true. All right. Such a great point on the fourth quarter earnings, too. I think that's, I just kind of hate the idea that, they're going to have to be, is like a hurricane or whatever, we took a $50 million hit because of the shutdown, or we took a $40 million hit or whatever it is. And that's unfortunate that it's going to affect the companies in that way. And also, so unfortunate that air traffic controllers and their families have had to suffer, and people working second jobs and bringing cash to pay the mortgage or whatever. And probably even worse for the TSA workers who have continued to show up and waiting for their paychecks. And they may live more paycheck to paycheck than certainly than a lot of us, and really feel for them. This has really been hard. And to me, the Congress has one job, to run the government, and they're not doing the job. So let's get it back open.
I hear you.
So the other big story of the week was the tragic crash of UPS Flight 2976, an MD-11 that went down just after takeoff from Louisville. As listeners no doubt know, the left engine in its pylon ripped off the airplane and likely ruptured the wing fuel tank. The wing was on fire as the plane rotated up, never got more than 100 feet or so off the ground, came down in a giant fireball. 3 pilots were killed, along with, I think at most recent count, 11 people on the ground. Our thoughts and prayers go out to their families. Just a horrible, horrible tragedy. The 34-year-old MD-11 had undergone heavy maintenance work in San Antonio from September 3 to October 18th. There's nothing particularly unusual about that. The NTSB has the cockpit voice and data recorders, and technicians recovered 63 hours of flight data and 2 hours of voice recordings. No doubt that left engine on the side of a runway will have clues along with the data recorder and the maintenance records. But I think this likely will be a long and complicated investigation. There are some similarities to the 1979 crash of American Airlines Flight 191 in Chicago, a DC-10 that crashed when its left engine ripped off because the engine had been mounted on its pylon incorrectly. The MD-11, of course, is an updated version of the three-engine DC-10. It's a very different plane in wing structure. It was all redesigned with a different pylon structure. And in fact, it appears that in this case, the pylon came off with the engine rather than in the American Airlines DC-10 case, the engine detaching from the pylon. There are fewer than 60 MD-11s still in service, most of them at UPS and FedEx, and all of them freighters. UPS and FedEx moved to ground their fleets Friday night, and on Saturday, the FAA issued an emergency directive grounding MD-11s pending further investigation. The concern, to me, it looks like the concern appears to be structural. We don't know what the problem is yet, but the FAA emergency directive said, quote, "The unsafe condition is likely to exist or develop in other products of the same type design," quote.
Yeah, that's such a horrible tragedy. Just really so awful. I'm the last person to speculate here, so I won't, because I know nothing about this. But I can't imagine that there won't be a lot of investigation on the maintenance that it just recently received. I mean, that was just like 3 weeks ago, I think. So anyhow, a lot of work to do before we will truly understand what happened. But, sending thoughts to all of those who were involved.
Okay, before we bring in Alex Cruz, I want to thank our sponsors. Thanks to Infinity Flight for its sponsorship of Airlines Confidential. As a proud partner of the American Airlines Cadet Academy, Infinity Flight delivers high-quality pilot training to meet the exacting standards of today's commercial airlines. Infinity Flight is building the next generation of airline pilots, focused, prepared, and ready for the flight deck. Learn more at infinityflight.com. Infinity Flight, the trusted choice of aspiring aviation professionals and the world's largest airlines. And thanks as well to Cirium, which has been working overtime, providing reporters with almost hourly, several times a day, updates on cancellations and delays. The Cirium offers the most accurate and precise data and analytics to enable airlines to optimize planning, operations, and passenger services. The right intelligence drives operational efficiencies, enables you to predict market shifts, and helps airlines respond quickly to maximize revenue, manage costs, and seize commercial opportunity. Visit Cirium.com for more. And thanks to Ontario International Airport for its support. Ontario International Airport is celebrating a decade of local control. Thanks to public support, the local community reclaimed ONT, revived it as a vital gateway in Southern California, and ensured the airport is ready to soar even higher in years to come. Visit flyontario.com/10 to learn the story and find out how you can join the year-long celebration of ONT's first decade of local control. I have to say, I covered a lot of the battle to get ONT under local control, out from under Los Angeles World Airports. And the results really have been amazing. Since 2016, there's been a 38% increase in daily departures, so more than twice as many nonstop destinations, a 65% increase in total annual passengers, triple the number of international passengers, a 40% increase in cargo tonnage, just on down the line. More restaurants, shops, parking, twice as many jobs across the airport campus. So ONT has good reason to celebrate, and they're really creative marketers. And I think this year-long celebration will be fun to watch.
In addition, thanks to Pratt & Whitney. At Pratt & Whitney, the pursuit of more sustainable aviation is foundational. For decades, Pratt & Whitney has been at the forefront of revolutionary advancements in aircraft propulsion technology. And by working smarter, cleaner, and greener today, they are committed to supporting the aviation industry in its goals of reaching net zero CO2 emissions by 2050. Learn more about Pratt & Whitney's smarter technology, cleaner fuel, and greener business at prattwhitney.com.
Okay, let's bring in Alex Cruz. Alex Cruz is the former chairman and CEO of British Airways, and before that, chairman and CEO of Vueling Airlines, the Barcelona-based ULCC that BA parent IAG acquired. He started his airline career in 1990 at American Airlines and then moved to Sabre when it was a subsidiary of AA parent AMR. In 2006, he founded a low-cost carrier called Click Air in Barcelona, then merged it with Vueling in 2009, and then sold it to IAG in 2013. He's currently the executive chairman of PortAventura World, Europe's second largest destination resort. He's also the vice chairman of WestJet, Canada's second largest airline, and a board member at both Recaro, the German seat manufacturer, and Fetcher Limited, the Israeli AI pricing technology company that Delta is using to bring multiple factors into pricing and optimize revenue. Alex has a bachelor's degree from Central Michigan University and a master's in industrial engineering from The Ohio State University. Welcome to Airlines Confidential, Alex.
Thank you very much, Scott. What a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
We're super happy to have you, Alex. And I'm going to kick it off with the standard first question. Tell us how you got into this crazy business.
All right. I was expecting it. So, but first of all, just a quick thanks on behalf of a lot of people I've spoken to about this podcast for continuing to keep Ben's project alive and doing a fantastic job at it. I've said this to you in the past, and I think that we all miss Ben, but to continue keeping his spirit alive through the podcast is fantastic. So again, Scott, thank you very much. Now, I'll tell you something funny and something serious. And in grad school in Columbus and Ohio State, I took an ergonomics class where I had to watch like over 100 hours of cockpit recordings because the project was to design a flight planning system. That kind of got me going a little bit. But eventually, really was the very kind introduction of a very close friend at university that got me into the hiring process at American Airlines. I got the job under direct report to Tom Crandall, a guy called Tom Cook. And really, the rest is it's history, really. Well, the funny story is when I was 12, and I was in middle school, I entered an essay writing contest. I think my parents encouraged me to enter it. So I wrote a story. And the story was about me boarding a plane and flying from home to London. And, being a young guy that I was, I offered the flight attendants in this story to bake a cake on the flight. And they accepted. I didn't know anything better. So I went to the galley, and in the galley, I found this really strange looking thing, and I thought it was a bomb. So I told the crew, and yes, we landed in Brest. I had to look it up in the Atlas book at home, and everyone was safe. So I won the contest. Maybe when I was 12, something was cooking then, but that's
wow.
The story and the funny story.
What was the package?
So the package was something that was hidden behind a pack of flour. Now, many years later, I realized that, most flights don't carry a pack of flour, but, I needed it for my cake. And I found some really strange thing with lights on it. So I told the flight attendants, and soon enough we landed and everyone was safe afterwards. Yeah, that's when I was 12.
I think that's good. I mean, you could have gone into aviation, but you could have also become like this, world-renowned chef making like pastries around the world. That could have been the other direction you could have gone here.
No, there's still hope. There's still hope.
Or bomb detection for the police. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, that's another good
writer.
Or flight attendant.
So many applications. Yeah. But that's how I got into the airline industry.
Yeah.
Straight from school.
Very cool. Well, a lot of amazing people got their start at American Airlines, just saying.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Alex, we often think of discount airlines as very different animals from full-service airlines, but the lines of distinction have blurred, certainly in the U.S. with basic economy tickets at traditional legacy airlines and things like first-class seats and elite loyalty tiers at discounters. You ran both. So talk about the differences and the similarities. So what was it like moving from Vueling to BA?
Yeah, this is a super fascinating topic. When I started Click Air and eventually we moved into Vueling, we realized that that there were many instances we just couldn't compete well with Ryanair. I mean, we were about just a little bit under twice their cost base. And we had a pretty low cost base, but Ryanair's was wildly low cost base. So we made it a mission to not just look for ways to lower our cost base, but to try to premiumize with only one condition. And that condition is that it wouldn't raise costs. So if you have flown Vueling in those early years, you would have had some interesting experiences, like morning newspapers on some business routes. We had hot towels for a while, free food for the first row. We put up some special soft headrests. We were the first ones to put on board Wi-Fi in Europe at the beginning of all the low-cost carriers, all kinds of things. But of course, the main premise was they couldn't cost us money. So we did it via partnerships that paid for all these services, from media groups to Pepsi. We innovated a great deal. I do have to say some of those partnerships ended, and we removed the service because for us, cost came first. Now, ABA was complete opposite. It was all about unlocking what customers wanted to pay for. And we did find out that we were competing on price on many routes with low-cost carriers. From Ryanair, probably a little bit less, but really very much with EasyJet, which was head-on, and then with a bunch of others. But in those really competitive pricing environments, we were still offering 2 pieces of onboard baggage, 1 checked-in bag, sandwich and chips, nearly unlimited alcoholic drinks, and of course, miles, upgrades, access to lounges for more expensive fares. It just didn't make sense. All the data that we had, not just from my own experience, but over and over again from many data sources, was that the majority of leisure customers, their biggest consideration was price. So we followed a little bit of the basic fare logic mastered by the legacy airlines in the US. We did create a very basic fare. We changed the onboard model to buy on board. And later on, we added free water and a snack. But in reality, we still kept many of the amenities, like 2 pieces of baggage on board. And of course, all the premium features, of course. I guess the other big difference is also, for me, from Vueling to BA was the long-haul product. There was so much of it. And the long-haul dynamics, operationally and commercially, were totally different. Premium, super premium, very large numbers of very high-tier frequent flyers, lounges, deep commercial partnerships with other airlines, alliances, etc. It was really a new world to me from a responsibility perspective. I mean, there's nothing new, but managing it very closely was a steep learning curve for me, for sure. Overall, going from Vueling to BA was probably a controlled but still significant shock for everyone. Size does matter in our industry, and going from 1 aircraft type to 7 aircraft types, from 100 to 300 aircraft, from 3,000 employees to 42,000 employees. Yeah, I mean, it was complex, but it was an incredible challenge, and I had an incredible team, super experienced, so it was fine at the end. For sure.
Let's build on that question. We're talking about what it's like to run a ULCC, and on this podcast we have several times had people weighing in on kind of this dynamic that we're seeing these days, where the ULCCs in Europe seem to be doing really well, while the ULCCs in the US seem to be really struggling. So everyone's given their perspective. What about yours? What do you think? What do you attribute that to?
Yeah, I know we've been seeing this over the years. Yeah, for sure. LCCs and ULCCs, they seem to have progressed differently in Europe than in the US, even though at the end they're about like 1/3, I think, of the total traffic, both in Europe and in the US. I guess depends who you put in the LCC or ULCC. But anyways, I would start out by saying that it all boils down to people and leadership, but maybe I make a couple of comments later. Maybe let's make it simple. Let's talk about 3 things. Let's talk about geography, politics, and economics. Just to touch on a couple of things. When you look at geography, well, that's pretty close. That you know that very well. There's dozens of countries, indeed nearly 50 countries, that are pretty close to each other. Very dense population. Many city pairs that are flown under 3 hours, and this is a fantastic sweet spot for low-cost carriers. I mean, imagine Southwest in the early years. That's what it did, in essence. Of course, the U.S. is different, much bigger distances, a bigger presence by bigger legacy carriers. In Europe, we also have secondary airports, many of them. If you looked at London, it has 6 airports, Frankfurt 2, Paris 3, Rome 2, etc. You can go down the list. That's a lot of alternative places to fly into in some of those really big cities. And prior to the explosion of low-cost carriers, not only was it secondary airports, but regional airports. Almost every country had a collection of really small airports that really had either no flights or would have one flight a day to the capital of the country, normally flown by the national airline on a small aircraft. So that's an incredible opportunity that has developed over the last 30 years in terms of geography. When you look at politics, if I think the regulation in the U.S. was like in 78, towards the late 70s, and we started to liberalize traffic 10 years later, like in the late 80s. But it was really only in 1997 when the cabotage rights opened up within the EU, which meant that any EU airline could fly any EU route. I mean, this was a big deal. I mean, all of a sudden, Ryanair, an Irish airline, began to fly between London and Glasgow. It's like, what's going on here? You know, this was a big surprise, and it provided an incredible opportunity for growth across the whole of Europe. Where are we today? I understand that the U.S. today is a single market. It doesn't allow any foreign carriers to fly domestic routes. I guess makes sense. But there's no competition other than the competition of U.S. carriers. And for airlines, control 75-80% or something of the domestic market. In Europe, we're not there yet. We are very fragmented. The top 4 airline groups in Europe, they only have like a little bit less than half, like 45% of the market. So overall, it feels like Europe overall, the European project allowed and facilitated more competition to take place, particularly across our country borders. But let me throw you a curveball. This fragmentation between all these different countries, it's actually been a positive for a couple. It's been a negative for many things, for many. But it's been a positive in that many of the low-cost carriers and ultra-low-cost carriers, they've been playing the different regions against each other to get marketing subsidies, airport cost discounts, and that's still going on. I get the feeling that goes on in the U.S. as well, but not as aggressively. And then maybe from, I said economics. From the economic side, I think that we did come from a place where travel was quite exclusive. I remember going up, and my first flight when I was 16, and I was moving countries. My family made a decision to move countries, and I would say that the majority of my friends at school, that maybe 1 or 2 had flown, but flying was just not. It was quite exclusive, and there was typically between any 2 points, you had the 2 national airlines. That's it. One starting in the morning, one starting in the morning on both ends, and that was it. And I think that when the low-cost carriers came in, there was an unlocking of travel opportunities through really low fares, and those economics began to create a different way of working. I think in the U.S. that happened slowly, maybe because the regulation happened earlier. And I think that U.S. market has always been a little bit more mature from an aviation perspective, no doubt. Most passengers were already part of emerging frequent flyer systems, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it was a little bit different. But anyways, I'll go back to the beginning of my comment. No matter what the economics and the politics and the geography are, I go back to people and leadership. I think we have. It wasn't a coincidence that the founder of EasyJet, Stelios, and Michael O'Leary from Ryanair, they did their pilgrimage to Dallas before they really went full steam ahead with their airlines. They really needed to learn from the US. But ultimately, they develop certain leadership styles and people cultures within those companies that allow them to really last. I mean, if you think about it, Michael O'Leary is still there, and he's still running the company. He's evolved in his business model a little bit, not the underlying principles of success, no change to those, but he's still the charismatic leader internally and externally. EasyJet has gone through multiple leadership cycles, but the overall strategy and product, I don't know, I would say the consistency of the product has been strong pillars. So leadership and people, I still think, make the biggest account for that difference and the ability to deliver pretty good margins and a good operation.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that, we make the case that in the US, a lot of the ULCCs have maybe taken their eye off the low cost ball, with, offering things that the bigger airlines offer, like bigger seats, things like that. Whereas, I flew Ryanair within Europe not too long ago, and I was almost physically tackled because my bag was too big in order to get like the extortion fee associated with carrying a bag that was a little bit oversized on board. So I think there's definitely been, at least through O'Leary's leadership, just this relentless focus on cost.
I was just going to ask if you thought, Alex, that there was a difference in how the big three had responded. My sense is that in the U.S., the big three, particularly post-pandemic, got very aggressive about laying on top of the low-cost guys and matching prices. And the idea was, we're not going to spill traffic to them anymore. In Europe, my sense is the big three really have ceded a lot of that market. They're interested in long-haul international and not so much, carrying people on short trips around Europe, certainly not at super low fares. And so there's been a different competitive response from the big three in the US and in Europe.
No, you're right. And I'd say that it feels from far away now that in the US, there's still a lot of competition market to market between low-cost carriers and legacy carriers. Maybe Midway and maybe O'Hare, but there's still a Chicago to somewhere competition. And yes, when you look at, pick the London market, Maya and I are familiar with, there is competition, but it feels like they're in their place. Every player is in their place. So it's very unlikely that a traveler in central London will be considering both British Airways and Ryanair at the same time. No, they will consider Ryanair because they're flying to a destination that BA doesn't fly to, or they'll be considering BA because it does, and they're happy to pay the extra 5, 10, or nothing at times, not to have the additional fees or to be scared when you're traveling. I think that there is a coexistence arrangement that actually has not extended that aggressiveness that you were making reference to in the US.
Yeah.
When I hear Kirby speaking about his own opinions about low-cost carriers, etc., embedded into that is a history of him pursuing the demise of those carriers. I don't think that exists here. Whilst there is day-to-day competing, when you think about BA, shortly after I left, created a new AOC in Gatwick, presumably to have lower operating costs and to be more effective to compete against EasyJet. So absolutely, there's competition there, without a doubt. But as you were saying before, Scott, I think that there are other components than just short-haul point-to-point. There is feed, there is partnerships, there is long-haul, there is long-haul connectivity, et cetera, which when you take a look at the whole picture, it probably diffuses a little bit of that aggressiveness. But all the legacy airlines at the moment, if you look at their strategy and if you look at the results presentation of all three of them in the last few days, you will find specific words and actions and initiatives that are aimed at reducing their cost base. So that will continue no matter what, because everybody knows that gives you more flexibility.
Yeah, and maybe the other thing to remember is that Ryanair and EasyJet are really well capitalized, and they're big companies that are strong financially, and not as vulnerable in that sense as maybe the U.S. LCCs are.
For sure, for sure.
Okay. You're involved now in AI-based new technology for airlines, and this is obviously a hot topic. What do you see as the potential for AI at airlines, and do you see peril in it as well? Do you think governments in Europe or the U.S. or both need to put some guardrails in place?
All right. So clearly, AI is going to shape many aspects of our lives and probably for the rest of our lives. But from where I stand, for me, AI is just another tool, a very, very powerful one, but it's just another tool. And it can help us provide better service, be more punctual. Yeah, sure. Do a price better, etc. Come back to that maybe in a minute. I have invested in several AI startups over the years because I do believe that after people and leadership, which is the number one driver of value generation in our industry, probably others, for me, technology is the next single value releasing tool that we have at our disposal. I shouldn't go into the details of the impact of AI in the future. Everyone is talking about it. Everyone is writing about it. But I do personally support all the efforts that are being done by both private companies and governments to create those guardrails that Scott you were mentioning. It's a very controversial subject, but I think that the conversation needs to continue. Now, us in the airline industry, no, I don't see much peril. So long as we stick to absolutely following all the current and future legislation, which I'm pretty sure will be the case right now and absolutely in the future. So when I go to ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or whatever and ask a complex question and I get an answer, I cannot tell, and I don't think anyone can, exactly how that engine generated that particular answer. So yes, there's uncertainty, and I hear from the U.S. Senate that there's uncertainty about how did that outcome come out to be and what information was used to come out with that outcome. When you have a system suggest a specific departure time, when I joined American, we were building a system called Ops Advisor, and it would recommend the best departure time or the best delay. Was it no delay, 1 minute delay, 5 minutes delay, whatever, taking into account all the variables associated with that departure, both in terms of incoming connecting passengers, onward connections, maintenance, crew connectivity, aircraft rotations, et cetera, et cetera. And he made a recommendation. I tell you, it was right. It was pretty hard to decode why that was the answer. And now with AI, it's nearly impossible. So I think it's right to ask all the questions about, how is AI or what data is AI ingesting in order to come up with the answers. I think it's super important. But overall, I think we've got sufficient guardrails in terms of existing legislation for all the things that we're doing in the airline industry. Beyond the airline industry, yeah, I think there's some strange things, but I hope that politicians and some of the larger private companies will help us with. But it's about value creation, and it's looking like these custom-made AI NLMs, they are creating incredible benefits for the airlines and for their customers. And so long as value is being created at those rates, I think we're going to continue seeing AI coming in. But remember, it's just another hammer. It's just another tool. We just need to use it properly. I think, I don't know. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah. I'm just really curious. Do you think there's peril in pricing? That was the sort of visceral reaction in the U.S. when Delta was talking about the work that it's doing with Fetcher. And there is I think, huge opposition to the notion that individualized pricing might provide price discrimination, right? If AI knows a lot about me and knows I live in a house that's worth more than a whole lot of other people's houses, do I only get offered higher prices than somebody living in a different zip code?
Without a doubt, I think there's full alignment on not going there. it just doesn't make any sense. And I don't think that it's compatible with existing legislation, but I don't think it ever enters the designers' heads. Go back a few years. I'm not sure if I don't remember hearing about this in the US, and I won't tell you which airline it was in Europe, although it's one of the ones that we've discussed earlier. You used to put or allowed to put cookies that would track a user searches in such a way where it was suggested that if you went back to the website later and you made a quote for exactly the same date and the same flights, all of a sudden your price would be higher. But if you went to another computer next to you, it would show you the original pricing. Now, I don't think that lasted very long and obviously created such degree of outcry because that's not right. It goes against every principle of being able to sell in a free market. No, I think that there are sufficient public aggregated sources of information that we don't use today to price, that we have a long road to continue coming up with the right pricing. What does that mean? It means that traditionally airlines have priced their tickets based on their own forecast of how full the flights are going to be, looking at historical information, how full was that flight or that market that week or that month or whatever the previous year. Looking at competitors' pricing, is my pricing cheaper or the same or higher than our competitors? I think that's probably like 95% of the pricing, how it's being done in airlines today. If you can now incorporate a live calendar of events the joke was in Vueling, whenever there was a final of the UEFA Cup in soccer, the revenue analysts would go to work and order pizzas because depending who won, the flights would be adapted to go one place to the other. And today all that done is done automatically. But whether there's many factors which are not taken into account. And the other thing I was going to tell you is, in my experience, the suggestions that these systems make are not consistently increasing prices. In fact, one of the probably biggest hurdles to go through is when you introduce technology like this to very experienced teams and the algorithm says, lower the price. They go, what? What do you mean? Yeah, lower the price. And it happens quite often. And it is because it looks at so much statistical data of performance associated with that route and the number of passengers and all this other stuff that is able to do a better suggestion to the airline pricing people. So no, I don't think we'll ever go into that the U.S. Senate was suggesting. I think that we have plenty of other levers to make it friendlier and to make it more sophisticated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think it's a dangerous path to go on to sort of get down to actual individual level price discrimination. But I do think using AI to get much better insight into how our competitors are pricing and what we should be doing based on historical performance, based on future bookings, things like that, I think it'll play a really big role, as you said. Okay, switching gears. Look, you have been a leader throughout your career in so many different types of organizations, big companies, small companies, scrappy companies, legacy companies. Let's stick with like the most recent big role at BA as the CEO. You had a lot of highs during your tenure there. It's some of the airline's most profitable years. You made some really strong investment in fleet. And there were a few lows during that period, like labor relations and IT outages and things like that. Just from a leadership perspective, how do you think about that time? If you could go back in time, is there anything you'd do differently?
Yeah. I think it's at William Blake, I think, they said hindsight is a wonderful thing, but foresight is even better.
Yeah.
Definitely, there's so many things that I've done differently in my whole career, without a doubt. But I think that there was a number of events which were quite pivotal, I would say, in terms of understanding how we operated as an organization. And that it's a day I'll never forget in my life. It was the Saturday, 27th of May of 2017. It was 8:14 in the morning. And the extremely well-known and high reputation, high quality company that we had running our data center made a series of mistakes that actually shut down our operations entirely. And it was the beginning of a half-term holiday. So we had, and not only that, but that Saturday, for some reason, I think half of the journalists in the UK decided to fly from Heathrow on BA. So they were all affected and quite upset that they couldn't leave. So you can imagine what they did when they went home. So it was terrible, but there were a lot of learnings from that. And BA hasn't had any self-managed outages since then. I would give special consideration to COVID. It was really bad, and it really strained our relationship with the workforce. I think we were the only major airline in Europe, perhaps in the world, I want to say in the world, that did not get any specific financial support from the government. And I asked in many occasions, but they told us very loud and clear that they did not want to prioritize aviation during COVID. And so it was brutal. We were, you know all about it. You went through it. No flying. We had a couple of cargo flights. We had huge fixed costs. What does this mean? It means that we made this public. Each day, BA was burning through 20 million pounds. That's 600 million a month with no revenues. So, IAG and BA, they were both, everybody was working overtime to raise money through private sources. Obviously, financial entities. We did sales and leasebacks, sold buildings. We even sold art. I was at the airport one really dark night, looked around the walls, and I realized that there was some pieces of art that looked quite fancy. So I invited Christie's to come in, and I think we generated like 2.4 million pounds for this art that we had spread through lounges and in some of our rooms. But anyways, the problem was we couldn't afford to have tens of thousands of employees with very limited government support that were not working, but they were getting paid, bless them in many respects. They all had their expenses. We did speak with pilots very early on in January of that year, and we did reach an agreement. It was really difficult agreement for both parties, but it gave us the flexibility to later consider different sort of restart scenarios. I still thank some of the union guys when I see them. And unfortunately, the other main union decided to fight rather than talk. And we held hundreds of, at that time, virtual meetings, inviting the union. The union would not come for a period over 3 months as part of a consultation process. So at the end, in August, we did sign some deals, but look, it was too late. And whilst the majority of the people left BA, about 10,000, were not fired, in quotes, I'm under no illusion that of the stress that they were under. I remember we set up a special building just to facilitate the exit of all these 10,000 people that left. And I forced my team, my executive team, to have at least one person of the management team in all shifts in this exit room, just to make sure that everybody understood that we were with them, that we wanted to help them, that we wanted to provide as much support as we can. But unfortunately, we've reached that stage. I hate to speak with those negatives. So on the positive side, 777 orders, new business class seat, the design of the new first class, introducing business class in domestics, premium meals. We opened the first wing in T5. We started the lounge renewal program. Super huge investments. And I got to tell you, I'm super, super happy to see that Sean, the BA, Sean was in my team before he went to run Aer Lingus, and Luis in IAG. They've continued that investment. BA can afford it, and the customers expect it. Oh, and by the way, we celebrated our 100th anniversary with a visit to our offices by the Queen, which was an incredible event. So I should finish in a positive rather than talk about all those difficulties that we did have.
Yeah, that's great.
All right. What do you see as the biggest challenges ahead for airlines? Anything in particular?
I don't know. I don't want to be boring. Addressing sustainability, absolutely, no doubt. Economic and fuel volatility, check, yes. Infrastructure and air traffic control, you talk about it every week. Absolutely, my God. And we've got our own problems. Here in Europe, August is normally the month of strikes. We know it. We have to budget extra aircraft and resources because we know certain countries, air traffic controllers will go on strike every year. So there's some things that have to happen in air traffic control on our side. Geopolitical shocks, yep, been there, done that. But at the end, I'll go back to what I mentioned before, and I think this is our big piece of homework. And I'm super happy, by the way, Scott, that you're doing something about it, and that's talent. Our industry just continues to change nonstop, and that means that the management teams, they need to change themselves. They need to adapt. And our operating models today are changing. Our commercial models are changing, and it's not just the availability of technology. You could almost even argue that's the easy part. You can buy it, install it, and run it. No, it's more than that. It's the road towards perfect safety records, which it's within our grasps to be there. Is the ever-changing needs of customers. People just want, they want it now and they want it better. And that should motivate us to provide better service overall. So to me, the biggest challenge is assembling teams of people that understand all these challenges and that they are well equipped, that they're resilient. I don't know if you've ever hired somebody from outside of the industry, but when I do, I have the talk before they actually sign the contract. And I say, look, you're joining the airline industry. This is different. And by the way, you may stay the rest of your life, but this is different. There's some things about it that are just, they're not the same elsewhere. So I think continue to curate that talent is super, super important. I teach a class, I mentor a lot of young executives. I think it's super important that we are realistic and at the same time motivating people to join us, and good people, by the way, not just people in general, but people with good skills, analytical skills, decisive, and ready to put in a good fight, because things are going to continue to change around us. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, absolutely. Well said. And I think for anybody thinking about the industry, there is nothing like it. I think in many ways the most exciting, challenging, but important industry that once it gets in your blood, you're hooked, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, Alex, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much. It's great to catch up to you. It's great to hear your insights, and look forward to doing it again someday down the road.
Thank you so much, Scott and Maya. Great to see you both.
Thank you so much, Alex.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right, we'll be right back with more on Airlines Confidential.
Promotional support provided by the ultimate AvGeek website, thearchive.net. A vast collection of airline memorabilia, timetables, route maps, rare cabin and airport photos, special flights, and more. All at thearchive.net, the hub of air transport history.
Thanks again to Alex for really a lot of interesting and provocative discussion. In the mailbag this week, Daniel from Atlanta has a transatlantic question that you may have some thoughts on, Maya. Daniel says, I loved the recent conversation with Theo Panagiotulius. The episode and some recent route announcements got me thinking about the potential decrease in the value of transatlantic partnerships. We're seeing airlines use the MAX family of 737s and the A321XLR to serve thinner transatlantic routes. What's stopping these airlines from just serving more of these markets with narrow-body aircraft rather than sending customers to their partners' hubs? And shouldn't this trend become more prevalent as aircraft become more efficient? What impact will this have on transatlantic partnerships? Thank you very much, Daniel. What do you think, Maya?
Yeah, Daniel's absolutely right that this trend is going to become more prevalent. The aircraft are becoming more efficient. The engines are more powerful. And as a result, there are these thinner markets that airlines are now able to serve that they weren't previously. At the same time, I don't think that spells any decline in value for the JVs. You mentioned John Ostrower at the beginning. He does this podcast with Brett Snyder and Brian Summers, The Air Show, and they just did an interesting piece on the JVs and the sort of transatlantic immunized relationships. They had some good stats, but over the last 20 years, so from 2005 to 2025, there's been an increase of 75% seats between the US and Europe. And things like 20% more airports in the US have service to London now than they did in '05. So these JVs, I think, have brought an enormous amount of value. I think that they have allowed the airlines the sort of market presence and the power to be able to grow, to be able to add flights, to add seats, to work with their partners, to be able to offer sort of a greater schedule. And the more they grow, I think, it's sort of a virtuous circle where the more they grow, the more opportunities they will have to grow. And I think just because we have now the XLRs, for example, that can fly some of these, like a thinner route like US to Shannon or something like that, I think that will only benefit the JVs going forward. Just because it's not going directly to the hub doesn't mean it doesn't go into the JV bucket. And so I think ultimately Daniel's right that we should see more of this, but also that I don't think that this is going to lead to a decrease in value of the transatlantic partnerships.
Yeah, I would agree. As my understanding is with the JVs, as you said, everything that's transatlantic is shared, right? So you're agnostic to whose metal it flies on. And so if you add nonstops from secondary cities, that just both airlines are selling it, and both airlines are sharing in the economics of it.
I mean, there can be carve outs depending on the agreement, but for the most part, yes, that's the case.
Yeah. So, it may help with hub congestion on both sides, right? If you're somewhere on the East Coast and you can get to where you're going nonstop without having to go through JFK or through London Heathrow, or through Paris or Frankfurt or Atlanta or wherever, that's certainly a good thing for travelers, and likely a benefit to airline networks as well. Okay, that's all for another edition of Airlines Confidential. Thanks to Maya Leibman. As always, terrific conversation. Thanks for bringing us Alex Cruz and great questions. I'll be back next week with co-host Oscar Munoz, hopefully talking about the end of that nasty government shutdown. Thanks for listening, everyone.
So long, everyone. Have a great week.
This podcast is produced by Mass Media. Info@massmedia.net.